everybody. Welcome to the podcast Groomed.Connect with my friend, your friend, Brian May.
Hey, everybody.
Brian's got a new camera, so we're seeing a better version of him now. Is that good or bad, Brian? You get more
I don't
details.
know, I'm working on the AI, trying to make me look more handsome. Takes
You
me.
broke AI.
Yeah, I think I probably did. It's probably a hopeless effort, but guy can give a shot.
Well, hey, welcome everybody to the podcast. I want to give you some updates. First of all, we want to update you on Sean Weaver. He was the guy that came on a couple weeks ago and shared that he had had a sexual relationship allegedly with Jeannie Mayo, and all hell has broken loose since then. So Brian and I both have been keeping up on him, just calling him every couple days. If Brian calls him one day, I'll call him the next, kind of thing. Doing good. I mean, he seems like he's doing really well, actually. Just like everybody else, I think when this stuff comes to the surface, it can jar you. I mean, this is something he's been dealing with for the last, what, 35, 40 years, and probably stuffed it, didn't really deal with it. Now he's starting to deal with it, and it can be overwhelming at times, but he's getting help. Actually, the Assemblies of God District of Nebraska, because that's where the offense happened, has stepped up. Toby Schnecklocht, he's the superintendent of the Assemblies of God for Nebraska. They've stepped up. I've talked to Toby a couple times, and they're going to pay for his counseling. So that ball is moving. So that's cool. That's awesome. And
Let me just say here in front of God and everybody, thank you, Toby. Good move.
Yeah, real good move. It's just really good that they believe him. You know what I mean? I think the evidence is pretty overwhelming anyways, but so yeah, I think that's great. So he's getting help. What also has happened is more people are coming forward to talk about their stories, not so much on the same lines as that, although there has been some rumblings and we're following those leads up and that kind of thing. But yeah, there's been a lot of people come forward saying, I want to tell my story. We have a list of people that want to come on the podcast, so we're gonna start bringing on some more guests. But yeah, it's been crazy, and so I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful to truth. When truth comes out, it's gonna win. Truth wins. Truth is gonna win. So it may take a long time, but it's going to win. So it's been a crazy couple of weeks.
Yeah, let me just say that Mike and I belong to, there are several Facebook groups, there are several messenger groups, there's several other, pun intended, cadres of people who have an attachment to all of this. And it's just a continual stream of people telling us their stories. New one probably every couple of days. It slowed down maybe to that, but for a while there, it was like several per day, and they just keep on coming. So if you're out there, like we always say, if you're out there and you need a place to tell your story, please contact us. That's not a plug to get you on the podcast. If you want to come on, that's fine. If you don't, that's good too. But it's good to be in a community where people share your experience and you can, tell your story to people who know where you're coming from.
Yeah, and also there's going to be some Zoom conference calls with your wife and others that will come on and do some support. We want to be more proactive about that, helping people walk through some of the stuff that's gone on. So, everybody's at their different places, as far as how they're dealing with stuff. I know for me, I've been dealing with this for a long time, but it's been on the front burner for like 2 years. I started writing the book over almost 3 years ago. And you're writing the book, you're talking to people, you're bringing up memories. I actually sat with a counselor for 13 appointments with him while I was writing the book. I needed that, man. I needed that because it wasn't just the Genie stuff, but stuff in Boston was first time digging that up in a long time, the molestations and people grooming me when I was a young kid because I didn't have a dad and all that mess. So it was whatever you have to do it. You know what I mean? I think, putting stuff under the rug and hoping it's going to go away over time isn't going to do it. You've got to intentionally look at some of the damage that was done. That doesn't make you a whiner. That doesn't make you a victim. It makes you somebody who is willing to see the damage and then go forward. You can't go forward. I always say this, you can't fix it until you feel it, right? You can't you can't fix it if you're just denying it. So, whatever you got to do, whatever that is for you, and no one here is going to tell you how that process is going to play out for you because that's your life. But I would encourage you to do whatever you got to do. Right,
Ditto.
Brian? Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
You are correct, sir.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, and I'm just going to just say this, I'm having to deal a lot personally with the anger of now people who are jumping off Jeannie's ship who should have jumped off a long time ago. And, I say it a lot, and, because it really does bother me that these people now are, because you can't deny this. If this allegation is true that she had sex with a student, that there's no coming back from that. I mean, you're done. So those people who were, lining themselves up with her, they can't now. I mean, if they do, they're going to get in trouble. I mean, and we'll make sure they do. I mean, and I want to go back to something because back in 2020, in fact, you know what? I'm going to say this. In 2020, I stopped drinking, and I'm going to just say this. This was probably because of the whole Genie thing. When that happened, I had not been drinking a lot, but I had, and I stopped. I'd come down a little bit and it kind of made it more manageable. But I realized that I was really masking a lot of this stuff that was happening with her. And I decided that, you know what, I'm going to go into this. I'm going to look at this without alcohol and deal, like, basically telling you what I'm, asking you to do, which is look inside and deal with it. And I did that. And it was 5 years ago, actually today, that I stopped drinking. And I needed to. There's some people that have drinks and they can do that. I'm not one of those guys that can have a drink. If I have one, I'll have eight. So and it's because there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of them is it really does mask a lot of the anxiety that goes on inside of me. And so during that time frame, when all that was going on, when Jeannie's cadre and I think it was the school of ministry was exposed because Jordan Macron, I always get that name wrong. Jordan got caught for messing around and then ended up, he made some mistakes with a student, and then Jeannie was denying it, and it all blew up. There was a guy, so Reggie Dabbs he was on her Facebook page that night, and he was defending her. And I'm friends with Reggie, so I texted him privately and said, if I was you, I would back up off this, and because there's more to this than what you think. And so he stopped. And then later, a couple weeks later, I was up in Minnesota with him at a speaking thing. It was a high school speakers bureau, whatever, and we were both at it. And we talked, and he said, "Oh yeah, my wife told me to listen to Mike, listen to you." And so as we were talking though, up at that deal, he started to defend her even more and began to, I could see that he was definitely leaning towards, he wasn't going to see what else was pretty obvious, which was there was a lot of abuse, a lot of people coming forward saying, these things have happened, hazing and manipulation and gaslighting and the whole thing, which I worked for her. So I already knew all that stuff was true. And so I was trying to convince him. I had my own story. And so I wrote him it was probably a 3-page letter and sent it to him while we were there at that conference and emailed it to him because I couldn't sleep. So I wrote out what I felt just so he knew exactly what was going on. And he read it, and then he said, hey man, he was good. He was like, sorry you went through that, but then it became pretty obvious that he jumped on Team Genie. And I'll tell you why, because he came out to Nashville a couple months later. That's where I was living. We went golfing, and it was crazy because on that golf trip, that round of golf, he probably around the 10th hole, he started talking about it. I was ignoring it. I didn't want to talk about it. I'm friends with him, so I don't need to be, we don't need to talk about that. But he brings it up. We start talking about it. And it became really obvious that he was trying to say some things to me from her. I worked for her for 10 years. I know her game plan. So he starts talking, and this is what he said. He said, I just want to let you know that Jay Sekulow is her lawyer. So I'm listening to him, and I'm just letting him talk. And he's piping on, he's saying all this stuff and what they're going to do and who they sued and or who they're writing letters to and they're all this stuff. And I was like, I just was listening to him. And then finally I said, Reggie, let me ask you a question. Did you work for her? And he goes, no. I go, you ever work for her? And he goes, no. I go, then shut up, because you have no idea what you're talking about. You got Jeannie Mayo's greatest hits, and they are great. There's some amazing things that woman has done with her talent and her ability. And I get it. I was under that spell for 10 years. So I totally understand. But when the door shuts and you're behind closed doors with her, it's a completely different deal. So you need to be quiet. And the other thing is, Reggie, you're talking about Jay Sekulow being her lawyer. Let me just tell you something. Who do you think you're talking to? I know that game plan. I know, I can tell you how that conversation went from her with you about that. I can tell you when she started crying, right, in the conversation, so she could get you to go and defend her and send a shot across my bow to kind of warn me away from doing anything. And then I said to him, listen, here's the deal. I said, I'm not willingly going to jump into this thing unless she goes after some of those kids. If she goes after those kids in Atlanta and she starts to rattle their cage by sending them, letters from lawyers and things like that, cease and desist letters and things, I'm coming in. And so he got so frustrated that he walked off the golf course after 16. I mean, it was 16 holes. We had 2 holes left, and he took off. And I was just laughing because I was like, this is why she gets to get away with stuff like that, because people like him, Reggie's a good guy, but they're stupid. They're like, they believe, they don't understand that where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And then they don't listen to people that have been in the fire. I was in the fire with her, right? I saw a bunch of stuff, but he didn't want to hear any of that stuff. He just wanted, he heard her cry probably, and she's played the victim, and then he jumped right into it and then tried to intimidate me. I was laughing, Brian. I was laughing so hard because it was a bunch of crap. It was just a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. And remind me again, Mike, when did this happen?
2020.
Okay. So this was
right after all that stuff broke loose with Jeannie at the Atlanta, Masters
Atlanta
Commission,
Leadership
whatever it's
College,
called,
yeah.
leadership school. Yeah.
So this was, let me just set the table here. I mean, this was happening contemporary with the Change.org petition that came out and all the revelations of what was happening in Atlanta. Anyone could go online and read the letter of dismissal from the church. I think their website is down now, but we have that letter. Anyone could read the just proliferating testimonies on the Change.org petition. And if you didn't want to believe them, then don't believe them, but you would at least have to consider them. And then anyone who's around her for any period of time really understands how she operates. If you put 2 and 2 together, you should at least come to the point, I think, a reasonable person would have come to the point at that time and said, maybe I ought to check out what's going on here and not just take somebody else's word, especially hers, for it. Maybe I should look at the evidence. Maybe I should even talk to some people and ask other people. So that's the environment that people were in. And if at that time you just weren't willing to hear it or weren't ready to hear it, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but it seems to me that you've got either some kind of emotional attachment or some kind of, business, I guess, advantage in that relationship, and you just don't want to give
Well,
it
let's
up.
talk about that, because I think that is true. I'm sure he really cares about her and there's some emotional stuff there, but he also made a lot of money off of her. He spoke at a lot of her conferences. She, definitely pushed his career forward. When I met him, he was doing schools and stuff, but he wasn't as big as he was. I mean, certainly he's a great speaker. He's an amazing. I still think he's the best school speaker, and I'm a school speaker. I mean, he's really good. So that was going to happen anyways. But she definitely advanced his career and helped him get to where he wants to be. Same thing with Rick Lormer and Rod Whitlock. I mean, Rod Whitlock and Rick Lormer would not have been in that national office if it wasn't for her, in my opinion. That's why I wonder, Brian, why these guys didn't take advantage of information. Like, just say, hey, you know what? Not that I'm some big name, but I worked for her. So it's not like I'm coming from the cheap seats. You know what I mean? I was in the game. I saw stuff, and it wasn't just me. It was people that were right up next to her saying these things, saying, we've got problems here, and they turn the other way. So I wonder about that. And I wonder, and I'm just gonna say this. I know I've caught Reggie at so many lies. I was with him one time with a pastor, and we were with him all day. We went out to eat. We were talking to different people. He was on the phone talking to different people. And when Reggie got out of the car to go to his hotel, me and the other pastor we were driving back to the church. He said, I pretty much caught him lying about 30 times. And it was stuff like numbers and things like that. And there's a running joke actually with some DYDs. They call it Reggie facts, because he basically makes things up. I mean, I'm not saying he made up his testimony. I don't know. I've heard different versions of it, so who knows? But the bottom line is, like spirits, right? Spirits reproduce spirits, and Jeannie's a liar. I mean, I've caught her at lies. She lies through her teeth. I mean, and so I wonder if there's some kind of connection there, like, it's okay to lie, right? And it brings this verse up that I was talking to you about beforehand.
Well,
It's in
before
James.
you read that, let me just make one point, just again to give people context. There's a lot of new people coming to this podcast, and they don't know, but Mike and I were both in the youth group in Bellevue. Mike and I worked. We were in leadership at that time. I was employed by her. She was my boss. I worked at the school as a teacher. We were heavily involved. We worked alongside the Rick Lormers and the Gary Hoyts and the Rod Whitlock. Rod had an office that he had to walk through my classroom to get into, right? We know these guys personally. We were in the trenches with these guys, working with them. And then later Mike was youth pastor in both Rockford and Bellevue. We're not sitting in, as Mike says, the cheap seats looking at this. We were in it, and we were in it with these guys. And that really is a legitimate question, is now, given everything that's come forth, I don't understand. I'm not going to attribute motive or guess, but I don't understand why people are taking the posture, even a posture of silence, that they are now. Just wanted to insert that. So go ahead.
No, I think that's a good insert because that we have a right to ask this question. And my question is this: James 3:16 says, "For where you have envy, selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice." So there's a progression, right? There's if you've got selfish ambition and your motive is to build your church and build your thing and feed your ego, then you're going to start to see things come apart at the seams. You're going to start to see sin get tolerated. And that's what I'm talking about. Sin got tolerated with good guys. I'm not talking about the people who were on the periphery, who saw it, who was stargazed and were mesmerized by the success, the quote unquote success. I'm talking about the Jeremy DeWerts, the Rick Lormers, names we've mentioned. And I'm going to include Reggie Dabbs in this because Reggie saw things too. And I'm wondering if that pushback he gave me up in Minnesota when we were there, it was like, well, yeah, there's things there, but look at her fruit. But that's what I'm trying to say to these guys. Like, where's their selfish ambition? You're going to have lying. You're going to have sexual disorder. You're going to have, just go down the line. It says it right there in James 3:16. There's a progression of what's going to happen because you allow certain things and then they become the social norm. They become accepted. And that's what happens. So Jeannie goes, they're going to let me lie on stage. No one's going to call me out on this stuff. No one's going to call me out on some of my bullying tactics. Then it must be okay. And then it spreads across the board. I've heard reports at Rick's church that there are people there that have been bullied and spiritually manipulated and that kind of thing. One of those guys is going to come on our podcast pretty soon. That's what I'm wondering about, Brian. Is there silence a way of saying, hey, don't look at me either? Is there silence? Is it telling? Is it telling us a message that maybe they allowed things in their life to, I know Reggie lies through his teeth. I've heard him. Several times I've been with him. I've called him out on it. So is there more stuff there? If we're tolerating that, is there sexual immorality? I'm not saying there is. I'm just saying James 3:16 says there's a progression. So when do we stop that? When do we go, hey, this needs to stop? we just let that go because he's on stage and he's speaking in Australia and he's a big name and all that. Michael Tate, that whole thing that's probably started out with small little things, and they're drinking on the road, they're doing different things, and it turns out he ends up allegedly molesting some of the younger, up and coming musicians. So there's a progression to this stuff, and when you don't listen to the people who are trying to blow the trumpet and say, hey, something's going on here, there's smoke. Well, if there's smoke, there's usually fire. And then what do? They villainize us, and they oh, you're just overreacting. I've heard this, Brian. I've heard this from people. You should just let this go. Shar Cobbs told me when I called her when she was having Jeannie at her church, I said, hey, you better listen to this because there's some stuff here. Oh, you're not forgiving her. And Steve Wida said the same thing to me, wrote me this long thing. You're not forgiving her. You need to move on. Okay. So if I had done that, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. We wouldn't be exposing what we're exposing. Sean wouldn't be getting the help he's getting. These students that got hurt out in Atlanta wouldn't be getting the help they're getting. So, stop being such wimps, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I have talked at length about how we understand how when people are first confronted with this who didn't see any of it, it's a hard thing, right? It's a difficult thing because you have this image built up in your mind. You have all of these good memories, and it takes time to begin to process that and to move through that. But a couple of things I just want to say when we know your history and we know that you saw some of the things that we saw when we saw them and you haven't gotten there yet, I don't understand that. I just don't understand that. The other thing is that some people who didn't, they maybe benefited, as you put it, from the bank robbery, but weren't part of it. I've witnessed seems like an unwillingness to even consider that maybe something was off. And I was reading a Facebook post today in a private group where they were saying, hey, can't we just keep our good memories of that time? And, there's a lot of good memories from that time. All of us have those. I'm probably a little bit more militant in my opinion than most, but what I would say to you is, yeah, keep those good memories, but consider this. A lot of the things we were talking about were happening contemporaneously to all those good times happening. And I just wonder, I said this to a former colleague from the school, I think a lot of the good experiences that we have, I think a lot of the good fruit, I guess, and memories that we take away from it, it's because of us. It's because of the people who were in it, who had good motives, who were trying to help people. I mean, good things were happening. I'm not going to let that bubble up to the top because I just question now that the leadership had genuine motives. But I will say that, like I said, my favorite example is the school. I mean, I have colleagues I know who are pouring their heart and soul and making great sacrifices to do a good thing. And yeah, good things came out of that, but I'm not going to give her and her minions credit for that.
Right. Right. And and to be fair, like a lot of those people to me, they remind me of Mafia Wives. You know what I mean? They're just spending the money and they don't care who died. You know what I mean? They're just I have good memories. It's such a good time. And okay, I'll give you that. But now we're seeing the bank got robbed. And if you're still not wanting to get the information on that, then I can't help you. You know what I
Right.
mean? I don't really want to have a relationship with you because I don't
Right.
have a relationship with people who aren't truthful. I try to keep my relationships with people honest. You know, yeah. I mean, I think if you're not going to look at it, then I don't know
Right.
if I can help you. And I let's go back to the good bad thing. I love what you said there. I think that's so true that it really has a lot to do with you. Like people get blessed in prisons, right? They're being mistreated in prison, but God shows up because of the willingness and the heart condition of the person, that person. So if your heart condition is I need God, you're gonna hear him, and he's everywhere. He doesn't need Jeannie Mayo. He doesn't need Mike Donahue, right? He can do whatever. But so when somebody shows up at Sperino or Cross Current or whatever, and they're hungry for God, they're gonna get that, through her. Even though there's some stuff. I was telling Toby this the other day when I talked to him on the phone. I remember Jeannie speaking at Rockford Women Alive. It was a all women's thing. Men weren't invited. I'd sneak in. And here's why. Because she's one of the best Bible teachers I've ever heard. Like, she knows how to break down the Old Testament and make it real. And what I liked about her doing the Rockford Women thing was there was no men in the room. So there was no flirting, there was no weird tension. It was like, it was just her talking to women, and it was great. And so I would sneak under the sound booth and just listen to it, and I got a lot out of it. But then she'd walk back in her office and go ruin someone's life. So I mean, it was like, it was, you know what I mean? Like, she was gifted, and God used her, and I'm sure those women were weeping and receiving, because that's the way it goes, you know, because you're in a place where you're you're in a place to receive. So you're going to receive from whoever. So, but that does not negate the fact that there was bad things going on. And I want to say this before I forget. Someone asked me the other day, they always ask this, did Sam know? Did Sam know? Did Sam know? I don't know what he knew. I don't know what he didn't know, but I do know this, that most like that guy was a man of God. So if probably early on, when he should have really held her accountable, and I don't know how you do that with your wife, but somebody needed to hold her accountable right from the very beginning, when some of these small foxes were coming into the vineyard and rearing their ugly head through gossip, slander. And when that stuff was going on, he heard about it. I don't know what he did, but I do know that for me, like, if I worked for him or any pastor and I'm not their spouse, and there comes a report about Mike Donahue sitting in the car at 11:30 at night with a female, at 20-year-old female, and I'm married, I'm sitting there counseling her, that I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to get at least talked to, and if it happens again, I'm going to lose my job. That's called accountability. None of that stuff happened with her. She got to do whatever the hell she wanted, and that's what I think really did her in, was she got, I guess I get to do this because I'm not being held accountable.
Yeah,
Then it
that's
got
an
worse.
no, that's an important point. We've talked about it before. There's certain part of that whole culture and part of that whole system is there's a just this walled off. It's almost like, well, these are the special people, so we need to protect the reputation of the brand, and so all of this is going to happen with little or no accountability, or even if there is accountability, it's accountability in a very small group. And we know that the small group around her she was incredibly charismatic, and a lot of people that were around her because they were ambitious, or they liked the attention. They needed the attention, and I'm going to go back to the scripture you talked about, and back to the point about, for folks that are beginning to see these things, it's like, I'm not a big Bible quoter, verse quoter, right? Because I mean, I'm not dissing the Bible, but I'm not smart enough to know what half of that stuff means. It's a hard book. But I will say this, is that's a little piece of wisdom there. And I would just ask people, think about that for a minute. Did you ever see envy, jealousy, selfish ambition? And not like, did it happen once or twice, but can you think back, and can you look, and can you see that pattern, and can you see that in the culture and in the water? I think most people who are honest, that had their eyes open, could say, yeah, there was a lot of that going on, right? And so that should give you a tip that maybe I should look a little farther, because that little piece of wisdom Mike read said, well, if there's smoke, there's probably fire. And I just want to encourage people to do that. And I'm not after retribution. I'm not after anything like that. The whole forgiveness thing. I mean, I think as much as I've been able to, I've forgiven all these people, right? It still makes me angry at times. I still have my own stuff to deal with. But as we've been saying ad nauseum, one of the things that we really believe, and we're seeing it happen before our eyes, is that when the truth is exposed and the people who got hurt have the freedom to come forward, the Sean Weavers of the world have the freedom to come forward and begin to tell their story, and to begin to deal with their hurt and pain and get healthy again. So, but I would just really encourage people, just take a minute and say, yeah, maybe the signs were there and I just didn't see them. I had to do that. I mean, we all have to do that at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw them. I saw them as the day I moved there. You see them, and when you're working right up close to her, you see them. But I get it that, you get mesmerized a little bit by how she makes you feel about yourself, and that has a lot to do with your own self-worth. One of the reasons, Brian, that I started Value Up, and that I'm passionate about helping people see their value beyond what somebody can tell you your value is, the way Jeannie did. She was the greatest at making you feel like you were valuable. Well, that to me says more about me than it does her. Right? If I'm hungry, it's what she always says: a hungry need is a dangerous need. If I'm hungry for value, I'm going to listen to con artists. I'm going to listen to people, talk me into things that I probably wouldn't have done. So the answer is not get around all good people, because we're not going to be able to do that until we get off this planet, right? The answer is for me to really see my true value in God, right? That He loves me no matter what. I don't need a person to show me that I'm loved. Now God uses people to basically tell me what He's trying to say to me, but it's not about them. If they become the source of my value, I'm going to be chasing it for the rest of my life. Because if that person decides that they don't want to, value me anymore, I'm screwed, right? So I've got to jump them. I got to go past that and go to the source, which is God. And the more I've done that, the more mental health I feel. Like I won't get duped again. It's not that I'm going to keep myself away from people. I still try to trust people and try to, you know, do what I can to be, a good person and all that stuff. But I'm not going to trust a human being to show me how valuable I am. I've got to go to the source. I've got to talk to God, and I do it every day, you know.
Right.
And that's what I teach in schools. I mean, can't teach God stuff, but I can help kids understand that their value goes beyond their social world, because that's them right now. If you're 15, you're like, oh my God, what does the world think of me? You know what I mean? And you're chasing something you already have, which is a cruel joke, right? You've got to understand you already have that value. God loves me whether I pick up the Bible again ever in my life. He still loves me, right? And so that's important for people to know.
And I mean that's a great point, because I think part of the allure of people like her is that they're giving people something that they think that they need, whether it's, love, the I can't think, the image of love, or a facsimile of love, or attention, or whatever, that they're getting that from her. And that's not yours or mine to give to anyone. That's inherent in all of us. And if you're a leader, especially I think if you're a leader in a Christian organization, that should be at the forefront of your mind. You should be, well, it's the analogy that you used in the book, right? I mean, it's like you should be like the matchmaker, right? You're introducing, the two parties of the date, then you're getting out of the way. You're not riding in the back seat on every date and
That
all
was
that.
actually your analogy that I stole. That
And
was
that's the
great.
idea. Like, you're trying to get out of the way. You're trying to be a companion. You're trying to help, and you're trying to get along. And if someone is like feeding off of that, that's like a warning signal. And we all like to feel that way, like we're valuable to other people. But we really, that's something that we really need to guard again. And to be fair, I mean, when we were in that, Mike, we were sucked into that to an extent. Cheryl will tell you that, probably 5 or so years into it, we just started getting tired of her game, and we began kind of breaking out of it a little bit. But the truth is, I stayed in that church, which, her successors, they were, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. I stayed in there for decades longer. I can't tell you why to this day. So I get it. I get being in the middle of it and being numb to it and maybe not being able to see it clearly. But when you step back again, and with everything that is coming to light, let that speak. Let that truth speak to you. Um, and and again, bear in mind that truth coming forth is helping people who have real pain, helping people who have real wounds, helping people who really need to be helped.
Yeah, somebody said on one of the Facebook threads that she said, my story wasn't as bad as yours, but, and I hate that. I hate when someone feels like they have to scale it, and that, like, oh, maybe I wasn't sexually abused, but there are people in counseling today just because of the, the manipulation and the gaslighting and I mean, some of the stories I've heard, and one of the girls, she's coming on here pretty soon. She was talking about that. She said, "Well, you know what? I'd love to come on, but I don't think my story's that powerful." And then I listened to her story and I'm crying and I'm going, "What are you talking about? Like, that's cruel what she did to you." It was cruel. And I'm gonna save it because I want to talk about it, but I want to wait till she comes on. But wow, I mean, no, that's what we exist for. We exist to bring these stories on and to help people. First, like you always say, it wasn't me, it was them. Like that's it wasn't you, it was them. I love that because that's exactly what we're trying to help you with, is that you felt like it was your fault. Because they made you feel that way. You didn't measure up. You didn't do the right thing. You didn't pray enough. You didn't give enough. You didn't do this enough. And so you didn't get to be part of the cool kid club. All that stuff. Like that's so bogus and gross. And we want you to know that that was wrong. That was wrong on
Yep.
so many levels. And we're not trying to make you into little whiners or little babies or victims, but again, you can't fix it until you feel it. You can't really you really can't get to the what happened until you completely understand it. And then you can get on your path for healing. So that's what we're about.
And let me just add on the end of that. Sometimes it's somebody just being, thoughtless, and you know, they should have been more sensitive. But the kind of thing we're talking about is systematic. It's a pattern of behavior, or it's tactics that were used wherever they could be deployed on anyone they could be used on. And that is abuse. And again, don't scale it. It's abuse. And abuse is abuse. And we need to call it for what it is. We need to see it for what it is.
Yeah. Well, Brian, next week we'll have a guest on. I think we're bringing on, well, probably shouldn't say, Juliana Morris is coming on. And so that'll be fun to have her. And
It'd be great.
yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
got a whole
yeah.
bunch of people lined up, don't we, Mike?
Yeah, we do.
So people want to come hang out with us knuckleheads here in Cyberland. So go figure.
Cyberland. All right. Well, everybody have a great week. We'll see you next week. We'll pop in if something happens, if something's going on. General Counsel is this week. I was not invited, Brian.
Let
Yeah.
me, as we close this, bring that up. I'm going to say this with cautious optimism. I think I'm reasonably confident that the Assemblies of God is moving in the right direction on this thing. Mike talked about Toby here in Nebraska. I really believe that the folks down in Georgia have acted honorably. And it seems like the national office has, pun intended, finally got religion on this. So to the extent that that bears out, thank you to the AG as well. We bang on them a lot, but it seems like they're handling this in an honorable way. And I'm very thankful for that on behalf of, again, all the bodies left in the wake.
I also want to say this, that I had a conversation with Pat Schatzline when this all went down in 2020, and we agreed to disagree on some things. And again, I have a lot of grace for people who didn't work for her. I do. So we agreed to disagree. But to his credit, when this came down a couple weeks ago, he texted me and he said, "I'm really sorry for not believing you." And I said, what turned it? And he said, the testimony of Sean, but there was some other things too that he had seen. And then I also had a conversation with Monty Hip one time, a couple times, and he basically cut bait with her a little bit too, because he saw some things, confronted her on things. And that's why I don't understand Reggie Dabbs. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing? People are seeing this, and something's connecting the two of you there, and I don't understand it. So yeah. I mean, truth is truth. So, but I
Yeah.
appreciate those guys, manning up and going, you know what? Yeah, she's a big name, and, but I can't tolerate these things, and that's important. When good men, good women stand up and do the right thing, it has a ripple effect. It sets a culture. It changes a culture. But when good men do nothing because it feeds their ego or feeds their bank account, I'm sorry, but you're causing a lot of problems. So stop it. Stop doing that.
Yes, sir.
All right. All
All
right. See
right.
you next week, everybody.
See you. Be
Bye.
careful out there, everyone. Bye.